and I am pleased to say that I will be moderating today's roundtable conversation that we are going to have as part of our ResiliArt online dialogue, which is happening, in fact, during the 8th session of the General Assembly of the States Parties of the 2003 Convention for the Safeguarding of the Intangible Cultural Heritage. We'll be looking at how living heritage and COVID-19 have been battling with each other, how living heritage has been helping communities stay together, and also helping them to get through the difficulties that they have encountered during this period of the pandemic. We do this, as I mentioned, as part of our ResiliArt online dialogue because culture is resilient, endures, and comforts in times of crisis. It's now my pleasure to introduce the Assistant Director General for Culture at UNESCO, Ernesto Ottone, for opening remarks. Ernesto, please.
Thank you, George. I'm going to speak in Spanish, so for all the other languages. So, muy buenas tardes. Antes que nada, quiero agradecer, por supuesto, a todos su participación en este debate ResiliArt sobre el patrimonio vivo durante la pandemia de la COVID-19. Es, por supuesto, un gusto poder compartir este espacio con representantes de comunidades en Italia, en Mali, en Palestina, Perú y Sri Lanka, y escuchar de viva voz sus experiencias sobre los impactos de la pandemia en su patrimonio vivo. Esta crisis sanitaria ha golpeado muy duramente el sector de las artes, la cultura y el patrimonio en todo el mundo. El cierre de museos, instituciones culturales y sitios de patrimonio mundial de la UNESCO han privado a las poblaciones del acceso a la cultura, pero también de importantes ingresos. La cancelación de los eventos culturales y religiosos nacionales y locales, las fiestas, los festivales, las ceremonias, las prácticas tradicionales han tenido un impacto directo en el patrimonio vivo de las comunidades, como nos han demostrado los resultados preliminares de la encuesta de la UNESCO sobre patrimonio vivo durante la pandemia, en el cual participaron más de 70 países a partir de sus propias experiencias. Las más de 200 experiencias recibidas a través de esta encuesta en línea nos muestran las diversas formas en que las comunidades han utilizado su patrimonio vivo para hacer frente a la crisis. Hemos visto cómo la comunidad bereber en las montañas del Atlas han adaptado sus canciones tradicionales para incluir mensajes de prevención para evitar la transmisión del virus. Descubrimos que las comunidades indígenas en Colombia han regresado a una agricultura tradicional, que los artesanos alrededor del mundo han confeccionado mascarillas utilizando técnicas tradicionales y que a través de nuevas tecnologías se han organizado festivales, talleres que han permitido la transmisión del patrimonio vivo a las generaciones más jóvenes. En conjunto, estas experiencias resaltaron el rol fundamental del patrimonio vivo como fuente de inspiración, esperanza y solidaridad que refuerza, por supuesto, los lazos que nos unen a pesar de la distancia física. Escuchemos, pues, los testimonios de las comunidades que hoy nos acompañan y que sin duda nos ayudarán a reflexionar sobre el mundo que queremos después de esta pandemia. Y solamente como para el cierre, para que entiendan que el patrimonio vivo es algo que se lleva, uno también puede tener su mascarilla tradicional que me llegó hace 3 días desde el Perú, de las comunidades que han sabido usar su ingenio, su imaginación y la innovación como parte del desarrollo sustentable y resiliente que nos invita hoy día esta conversación. Muchas gracias. Georges, vous avez la parole. Merci beaucoup.
Ernesto Ottone, thank you very much for your opening remarks, and we do appreciate also how you have helped us contextualize what we'll be doing in the course of the next hour and 20 minutes or so. In fact, Ernesto did talk to you about the fact that we are spanning the globe, in this conversation. We will be talking to, or going to, in fact, even Italy, Mali, Palestine, Peru, and Sri Lanka, and all of it to have this conversation around how our living heritage has been so incredibly important to these communities, and also in terms of helping them sustain themselves at a time of crisis. So I ask you to buckle your seatbelt because we'll be moving around, and I'm sure you're going to enjoy the ride. The premise for this is based on the online survey that UNESCO launched on culture in April of 2020. That survey, as of August of this summer, has now included some more than 200 experiences from over 70 countries, showing the different ways in which communities have been impacted by the pandemic and also how they have been responding to it and also using their living heritage for being resilient. That survey, by the way, is still open, and so I do encourage you to definitely go online and give us your contribution. So what has the survey told us? Well, it has confirmed that the pandemic has had a tremendous impact on many of these indigenous communities and the living heritage in different communities around the world, but also it has provided opportunities for how we adapt to these challenges and how people have relied on their traditions, on their practitioners to help them. Intangible cultural heritage definitely has the capacity to adapt and evolve. And we have seen that happen. And we will hear now more about that as we begin our conversation with our various participants from around the world. At this point, what I would like to do is go to Cremona, Italy, where we are going to hear about how the traditional violin craftsmanship in Cremona, a craftsmanship that goes back centuries, has adapted and has coped with the crisis. In Cremona, we have joining us Gianluca Galimberti, the mayor of Cremona, and also Virginia Villa. Virginia Villa is the general director of the Fondazione Museo di Violino Antonio Stradivari in Cremona. So I hope that I did my Italian heritage credit, although my family comes from Sicily. So I'm glad I didn't do this in the Sicilian dialect. Gianluca, I'm going to start out with you first. Can you give us an overview of just, what was the impact and how serious was Cremona impacted by COVID-19?
Obviously, thank you very much to all the people, and we are very happy and great honor to be here. Surely we lived a so dramatic moment and period for all the citizens of our town and our country. Only just some data in order to understand the impact of this dramatic period. Cremona surely was one of the locations in Italy that was most severely affected by COVID-19. Some data, as I said before, the hospital in Cremona was the hardest hit in all the northern Italy. For example, all the beds taken up by patients infected by the virus. The second hospital in Europe to be hit by COVID-19, and more than 6,500 cases of COVID-19 in Cremona is recorded in June 2020, and almost 400% increase in death in March compared with the 2015-2019 average. So this data can describe very well this dramatic period. And I want to stress that this data, these numbers correspond to history of families. This is our history.
Virginia Villa, can you give us an idea of how the expertise that was within the community helped to facilitate the sustainability that's so important for living heritage, and also its viability. And of course, within the context of the amazing violin craftsmanship that is notable in Cremona.
Shall I say 2 points for one? Shall I say that due to the lockdown, violin makers unable to physically enter their workshop and access their wood and materials were impeded their ability to continue their practice. Of course, digitalization has been used to mitigate some of the COVID-19 impacts in Cremona. For instance, the Museo del Violino intensified its activity with social networks and maintained virtual connection, making resources that were typically to the physical disposal of the violin makers available online. However, shall I say that the most integral aspects of the ICH cannot be replaced by digitalization, such as practitioners seeing, touching, even smelling the raw materials from which violins are crafted, which this is an integral part of the ICH. On the other hand, shall I say that cultural institutions were closed. So the cultural institutions play a role in facilitating the active transmission of knowledge and immaterial know-how of the Cremonese community, and play a role also in the culture of local civil society. The Museum del Violino, for example, it's home for scientific laboratories, Stradivari collection, also, of course, the ancient instruments, the collection of the ancient liturgy of Cremona. And for violin makers, these are really strategic tools to constantly learn and conserve their practice. For this reason, violin makers can enter the museum as many times as they want, as they need, for free. That's why the material reality of the relationship between the violin maker and the violin museum cannot simply be shifted on online reality. But shall I say that the pandemic increased the consciousness of both the importance of transmission of the practice as well as digital access to research and documentation for younger generations.
I'm interested in part to one of the comments that you made regarding the use of social networks.
Yeah,
that sounds, it's an interesting dichotomy when we think about, we're talking about the hundreds of years of history of violin making in Cremona, and how that tradition was in part able to sustain itself by communication among the practitioners using social media, a very modern technology. Do you think Stradivari would have approved?
I think so, because Stradivari was a man who was constantly looking to the future. In all his life long, because he was very old when he died, he was always thinking of also practicing something new. So he would have approved. And probably he would have really appreciated what we had tried to do with social network. I mean, all the artifacts of Stradivari, drawings, molds, tools, were made at disposal of the violin makers on the Google Art, with the hand of Google Art. So we are trying, we are facing, of course, new time,
Right.
and to use in a better and in a new way what was, of course, not new at all. And in another side, shall I say, that we use the social network, especially YouTube, for example, for broadcasting everywhere, something that was really a symbol for the community, a symbol of the city. We made a little brief concert up to the tower of the Torrazzo. Torrazzo is the symbol of the town. It's a very known touristic place, and we put Lena Yokoyama, one of the young violinists that is usually doing audition inside the auditorium of the Museo del Violino, up the Torrazzo, and she played with a modern violin, something very, very easy for everyone. But she was a symbol, a little piece of music, Ave Maria of Gounod.
Could people hear that or throughout Cremona? Could you hear it if you were in your, during the confinement? This was during the confinement?
Yes. Yeah, yeah.
And that music could be heard for everybody.
Yeah. Yes, because we had the help of many actors, A young collective called Pro Cremona helped us with the Acid Studio, another collective, to broadcast everywhere. And so we recorded, of course, and we had also the help of the municipality, of the municipal police, because we couldn't move. So
I'm just trying to think about this, and I'm envisioning it, and I have to tell you, I cannot imagine. I know that, let's say, for example, in other cities around the world, people came out at a certain time and applauded the those people on the front lines, etc. And from my apartment in Paris, I could see people across the way, and we got to know each other in this way. We shared that experience, but to share such a beautiful experience of having such a wonderful music played, I think I would have been in tears myself. I think I would have just been overwhelmed with tears of joy. What I'd like to do now, though, so that we can continue to pull in some of these experiences from some of our other communities that are joining us, and we'll try to move through this in a way so that we can also come back and have a bit more of an interactive conversation. I want to thank you both right now, Mayor, Virginia. We're going to go to Mali, where we have Boubacar Kouloumase standing by. He is accompanied by Moussa Moriba Diakité. And I'd like to talk to our friend Boubacar, whose story is a story that I think is typical when we talk about living heritage. It is the traditions that are handed down from community to community, and Boubacar actually learned his craft of working as a mason with earthen architecture from his father, and I assume he probably learned that. His father probably learned it from his father. I have seen some of this work in some of the videos that UNESCO had circulated following the opportunity for us to begin restoration of some of the most beautiful libraries and mosques in Timbuktu. And when you witness the earthen, these incredible masons, one of the things that struck me was how they're doing this with their hands, and they're putting on this earthen mud, and what they are leaving there is also their fingerprints in a way. They're leaving a part of themselves. Their DNA is wrapped into these structures, and this has been something that has been going on for hundreds of years. And so with that, Boubacar, I'm very interested to know how was it that you were able to maintain, I guess, your inner strength from your living heritage, as you, I'm sure, were anxious to be again applying this wonderful craft that has been passed on from generation to generation. And so I'd like you to start off with a kind of a reflection. I do want to tell our audience we are having a little bit of an audio issue with our colleagues and friends in Mali. But we think we've got it solved, but with a bit of what we would say in France, a bit of bricolage. So we're going to give this a shot, and I hope that we can make it work. So Boubacar, please tell us a bit about your story in Mali.
Bonjour tout le monde. J'aime penser à toutes les personnes qui sont tombées dans cette épidémie. Et je sais que les malades aussi, aujourd'hui, je les souhaite un bon rétablissement. Bon, chez nous, ça a été un panique.
Okay, I think we're still having some difficulty with this audio connection, and it's unfortunate. But we will try on the backside of this conversation to resolve this technical issue, because I think it's, if we can, it would be wonderful to hear from Boubacar, because as I've said, it is a magnificent sight to witness these masons who have essentially been passed down the history of centuries, and they take that and they put it literally with their hands on these structures. So what I will do at this time is for us to move to our friends in Palestine, and I'll wait for my colleagues at UNESCO to tell me when we're able to get back to our friends in Mali. So, gentlemen in Palestine, how are you?
We are fine, thank you very much.
So, we're joined here, I have to say, by Hamza Akrabawi and also Fuad Mahdi. Hamza is a folklorist, a researcher in popular folklore. Fuad, there's a lot more to these gentlemen. I'm just giving a brief so that we know that you have the credentials, otherwise you wouldn't be here. And Fuad comes to us from the tourism sector, and his main passion is the collection of folk tales. I think that there are wonderful stories to hear about the communities in Palestine. First of all, I think Hamza, could you get us started just with a kind of a view of how and in what ways the communities were able to adapt during this period as a result of perhaps not having the capacity or the freedom, really. They have the capacity, but not the freedom to practice their rituals associated with important parts of the family life, births, marriages, sadly also deaths. All of these have significant rituals that enrich the community and have also been passed on from generation to generation. So how did the community adapt? Could you tell us, Hamza, from your experience over the last few months?
Okay.
I think we need to mute the microphones of our friends in Mali, if we could do that, please. For my team, we're having a bit of a technical thing. Let me see if I can be the person who does it. I'm unfortunately not empowered to do so. So I call out to my colleagues so that we can please mute the microphone of our Mali colleagues until we have and friends until we have this resolved. Is that possible? I think we may have achieved that. Gentlemen in Palestine, please.
So just a heads up, we're going to speak in Arabic.
Fabulous, and we will listen. That's wonderful. A beautiful language and one of our 6 official languages at UNESCO.
أولاً مساء الخير لكم، يعطيكم العافية جميعاً. شكراً لليونسكو لإتاحة الفرصة لفلسطين كي تتحدث عن أثر الجائحة على تراثها الحي. بلا شك إنه فلسطين من أغنى الدول من التراث، لأنها بلد يعني فيها الحضارات التاريخية والدينية والأماكن المقدسة للديانات السماوية. كواحدة من دول العالم تأثرت في الجائحة في طقوسنا وممارساتنا وأعيادنا، تأثرت الطقوس الشعبية والأعياد والاحتفالات والحياة اليومية. كمجتمع بتقوم حياته على التواصل والتفاعل، اللقاء بين الناس ببلش بالمصافحة باليد. هذه من الأشياء اللي الجائحة أدت إلى توقفها. كمان فعالياتنا وطقوسنا اليومية في الأفراح والموت هي طقوس جماعية بتقوم على التشارك الجماعي، وهذا أدى إلى توقفه. لن أخوض بتفصيل كل الطقوس الشعبية والمهرجانات والاحتفالات والحياة اليومية اللي توقفت، لأنه يكاد الأمر يكون مشترك مع كل دول وشعوب العالم. لكن كيف لجأ الفلسطينيون كشعب محتل، يعني مصادرة الحرية والإرادة السياسية من قبل الاحتلال الإسرائيلي، كيف لجأ لاستخدام تراثه الحي للتغلب على الجائحة وأثرها الشديد. في ثقافتنا المحلية هناك شيء اسمه العونة، التعاون والتكافل الاجتماعي. أول ما لجأنا كفلسطينيين للتغلب على الجائحة وأثرها على تراثنا الحي وحياتنا اليومية، وظفنا موروثنا تراثنا في التعاون المجتمعي في التكافل. تم تشكيل لجان ومبادرات في الأحياء والقرى والبلدات للتعاون في توفير الأكل والشرب، في التعاون في توفير الاحتياجات اللازمة للمجتمع. كمان وظفنا تراثنا وفلكلورنا القصصي والغنائي والأمثال الشعبية للحديث عن الجائحة. فالأسجال والأغاني الشعبية تم تحوير وتغيير بعض كلماتها ليدخل فيها موضوع الجائحة وأثرها وكيف أثرت حياتنا. تم توظيف إرثنا القصصي والأمثال والشعبي للحديث عن النصائح والتوجيهات للناس للحذر من هذا الوباء وضرورة الالتزام بشروط السلامة. تم توظيف أيضا تراثنا الملبسي القماش في صناعة الكمامات والأشياء الواقية اللي بتبعد عنا مخاطر العدوى من كورونا. كمان من الأشياء اللي اشتغلوها الفلسطينيين، لجأنا إلى كل الأدوات التراث في العلاج الشعبي، كيف كانوا أجدادنا يعالجوا بعض، وتم التركيز على بعض المأكولات والأشياء اللي فيها
نباتات. Can I just jump in very quickly, Hamza? I want to just ask a question about how much you relied, though, on the traditions, traditions that may have been related potentially over the centuries to other pandemics that might have occurred, and those and that history may have, and those stories may have helped people put a context around this, and also potentially to know that they can come out of this based on the stories that are part of the local culture and the local traditions by the practitioners like yourself.
يعني احنا قمت بعمل بحث عن الأوبئة في فلسطين ونشر جزء منه كمقال تاريخ الأوبئة في فلسطين. استعرضنا تاريخ الأوبئة والأمراض اللي فتكت في المنطقة العربية خلال 2000 عام. بعدين أجرينا بحث عن تاريخ الحجر الصحي في فلسطين، وأخذنا الكارانتينا اللي هي الكلمة الإيطالية الكارانتينا اللي تستخدم أيضا عندنا، وعملنا دراسة عن الكارانتينا المحاجر الصحية في فلسطين، متى بدأت فكرة الحجر الصحي في مواجهة الأوبئة والأمراض. واكتشفنا من خلال إجراء المقابلات والرجوع للمصادر التاريخية والسير المدونة إنه طول عمر الإنسان بيلجأ لمثل هذه الأدوات ليعزل نفسه ويبعد نفسه عن المرض. وفي تراثنا كمان العربي والإسلامي هناك نصوص ذات طابع ديني بتحث على الحذر من الأوبئة. في حديث للنبي محمد عليه الصلاة والسلام بيقول: إذا نزل الطاعون بأرض فلا تدخلوا إليها. وكمان بيحكي للناس اللي في هاي الأرض المصابة بالطاعون ما يخرجوا منها. فكل هذا كان حاضر إرثنا التراثي القصص الغنائي في نصح الناس ودعوتهم للبقاء في بيوتهم. الزجالة المغنين الشعبيين جابوا أغاني وبلشوا يغنوها على فكرة الكورونا وضرورة نقعد في البيوت. الطريف إنه النكت الشعبية كمان دخلت عندنا في الكلور، النكتة للتعبير عن الوباء والتعامل معه. فالناس كان في تفاعل يومي من خلال موروثهم، لأنه إحنا مجتمع يتسم بالحفاظ على العادات والتقاليد.
Can you, I mean, can you tell us a short joke? I mean, we all need a good laugh. Is it possible that you could retell a short joke for us about the coronavirus? Do you have something to share?
عندنا مغنية عربية مشهورة اسمها أم كلثوم، وكمان عندنا مغنية عربية اسمها فيروز. فهذول مغنيات مشهورات. صارت تطلع نكتة إنه أم جرثوم وفيروس، فحولوا اسم المغنية أم كلثوم لأم جرثوم، الجرثوم اللي هو، وفيروز لفيروس فيروس. فصاروا يحوروا أسامي المغنيين يطلعوا نكت على المغني والمغنيين. كمان عندنا نكت لها علاقة في الأكل، نكت طلعت لها علاقة بالشخوص والرموز اللي بيطلعوا على الإعلام بنكتوا عليهم من خلال كورونا. واللطيف إنه البعض عمل صفحة على السوشيال ميديا لكورونا، وصار ينشر أشياء كأنه الفيروس، فالناس صارت تتفاعل معه وتخاطبه إنه أنت كل بلد ثانية، ما تيجي علينا، ابعد عنا. فالناس صارت تتفاعل مع هذا الموقع الإعلامي كأنه الفيروس من باب النكتة والتنكيت والمزاح. كمان صار عندنا قصص قصيرة ذات طابع دعابي. ولما عملنا دراسة عن تجليات الفكاهة في ظل الجائحة، اكتشفنا إنه النكت كانت في الأول ذات طابع غير مبالي، يعني الناس مش مقتنعة بالفيروس. فجأة لما صارت الحالات تصاب في فلسطين تحولت النكت والقصص لذات طابع مخيف، إنه بدأنا نشعر بالخوف. الآن النكت صارت تحكي تتجاوب مع فكرة إنه الفيروس صار منتشر بفلسطين وإنه صار في أعداد كبيرة. فكمان النكت والفكاهة بتتغير مع موقعنا بالنسبة لعدد الإصابات بالفيروس.
I have to say, I think you have a new book that must come out about how to survive a pandemic with a smile and maybe even a good laugh. I'm going to ask Fouad to jump in here. Fouad, are you seeing then, in fact, maybe transitioning as from what Hamza was telling us about these change, about how things have been adapted? Would you say that we have new folklore emerging that will then be part of the folklore for generations to come?
Yes, indeed. Actually, we're talking about a living heritage. So it is one that is evolving with time and, new events that would come up. As my colleague mentioned, there were many twisting of folkloric songs and jokes to adapt to the corona. But these will actually evolve much more with the time, and they will become part of classical folklore, not new ones to be. Also, we have something to pass time before TV and radio in here, which is actually telling short stories, especially of people traveling. They would actually tell their stories with a bit of changing for giving more drama to the events. So during the Corona, we had many of these stories. I remember one of them, if I may.
Please.
Yes. So the understanding of the masks and their use was at the beginning not very clear. So it was imposed by government, and as part of checkpoints that we have in our country, as we lie under occupation, we have to live with that. So people would actually tell each other with cars, with signs, that there's a checkpoint ahead, so you need to take caution about that. So people would actually be more more ready to get in the checkpoint. So at the beginning, just at the beginning, these masks were just because they were imposed by the government. So people would tell each other that there's a checkpoint ahead, and people would put their mask just for the checkpoint. So one funny story that happened, that afterwards, when people were more conscious about it, they were laughing about the situation. It was when they were coming up to a checkpoint, and the driver took out masks and started giving them to people. So they wore the masks. And after they passed the checkpoint, the driver asked to collect the masks.
Somewhat defeats the purpose of the mask, doesn't it?
But as I said, these stories would actually be exaggerated and inflated to have more irony and sarcasm about it. So this story will be inscribed in the Corona pandemic for future historians to document.
To be able to document. Okay, listen, I think right now, I'm going to take us now to a place that is probably as far away from Palestine that you can get in a few seconds, which would be down to Peru. Because down in Peru, we have had an incredible story coming from a community in Saua in Peru, and traditional arts and crafts, or to the traditional crafts and traditional designs being applied to face masks, not unlike the face mask that Ernesto Otone was wearing when he joined us at the beginning of this conversation. And so as we go to Peru, I want to be able to now introduce two of the practitioners of this living heritage of the traditional designs and patterns of the Sarhua art. And we have with us Venuka Evanan and Violeta Quispe Yupari. And so, oh, I love it. Ernesto's got his mask up. Thank you, Ernesto. That's great. It looks fabulous. So, to our friends in Peru, let's find out what you've been up to through the pandemic, through this pandemic. Violeta, I'm going to start with you and ask you, what was the impetus for you to create these masks, Violeta?
No.
We seem to be having a problem with can you hear me?
¿Puede volver a preguntar, por favor?
Okay, you can hear me. Oh, okay, sure. I'll repeat. Sure. So Violeta, what was it that made you decide to create these masks? Why did you think about this and do it?
Sí. Bueno, primero le voy a dar el pase a mi amiga, mi prima Venuka, para que pueda interpretar un poco la idea. Buenos días.
Okay.
Buenos días, George. Mucho gusto. Mi nombre es Benuque Banán y estoy junto a Violeta Quispe. Como tú bien mencionas, quieren saber la historia de las mascarillas. Pero antes, para que tú puedas entender y todos los que están presentes en la reunión puedan comprender de dónde partió esta idea, yo te quiero contar que este arte nosotros la hemos heredado. Nuestros padres provienen de una comunidad que está en Ayacucho, que está al sur de la capital del Perú. Este arte ha sido declarado Patrimonio Cultural Inmaterial de la Nación en el año 2018. Estamos hablando de las tablas pintadas de Sarwa. A partir de ahí, nosotras somos herederas de esta expresión artística. Y es ahí que cuando entramos al hecho de esta situación, la pandemia, esta enfermedad, el COVID-19, es que nosotros nos pusimos a pensar cómo podemos adecuarnos a lo que estamos viviendo. Y entonces, nosotros como ya hemos heredado este arte, gracias a este arte hemos viajado, de mi parte he viajado a diferentes puntos. Tengo 17 años en esta labor como difusora, transmisora del arte tradicional contemporáneo de la comunidad de Sarwa aquí en Perú. He dado talleres también, he compartido tanto en la comunidad, en la capital y en diferentes ubicaciones geográficas, ¿no? A nivel mundial. Y cuando pasó esta situación, el día 20 de marzo, te voy a mostrar algo. Mira, este es un papel y es una liga. Entonces, el 20 de marzo me puse a pensar, las salas de exposiciones están cerradas. Ya no vamos a poder exponer nuestros trabajos, nuestras ideas, nuestras propuestas como mujeres andinas. ¿Cómo hacemos para seguir mostrando nuestras propuestas? Entonces agarré un papel, este es un papel, ¿no? Y unas ligas que tenía, y me puse a jugar. Voy a cambiar de soporte, de arte, de mis maderas, a un papel, y voy a plasmar mis ideas. Yo como mujer heredera de este arte de la comunidad de Sarwa, yo plasmé las polleras de las mujeres, y lo pinté, y me puse a jugar de esta manera. Lo subí a mi página, a mi red social, e invité a que más artistas, sean de la comunidad de Sarwa o de otras partes, puedan intervenir sus mascarillas con su arte. Y ya luego, el 23 de marzo, me puse a pintar otras mascarillas con plumones, así como jugando, igual con la iconografía de las polleras, de esta forma. Y fui compartiendo la idea. De mi parte, así inició. Y luego conversé con el alcalde de Sarwa, de la comunidad, para que esto se replique y lo hagan otras mujeres. ¿Con qué objetivo? Para que ellas sigan, a pesar de esta situación que estamos pasando, sigan difundiendo su arte. Y al mismo tiempo que genera de alguna manera un ingreso económico para salir adelante. Eso es lo que compartí. Y acá también en la capital, en Lima, mis demás compañeros argüinos también comenzaron a replicar. Yo te quiero contar que aquí en la capital tenemos un lugar en distrito de Chorrillos donde estamos agrupados los artistas de la comunidad de Sarwa. Lleva más de 40 años aquí en la capital resistiendo a través del arte, a través de la pintura, luchando, y han pasado situaciones difíciles como que es el conflicto armado interno en los años 80, 90. A pesar de eso, resistieron. Y ahora nosotros, sus hijas, tomando ese ejemplo de nuestros padres, continuamos y hemos pasado fuertemente, firmemente, cogida del arte para salir adelante ante esta situación mundial que es la pandemia. Es un poco lo que yo te quiero contar y también mostrar lo que justamente en este confinamiento pude pintar, que es mi autorretrato con mi tapaboca, donde igual muestro a la mujer fuerte, a la mujer luchadora. Yo soy madre, yo saco adelante prácticamente a mi hija sola, tuve que ingeniármelas. ¿Cómo hago? No quiero desligarme de mi arte. ¿Cómo hago para dar a mi hija de comer y sin perder mi identidad? Entonces, esto fue las ideas que tuve, y después también seguí seguimos pintando, trabajando más mujeres, saliendo adelante con la pintura, plasmando sobre nuestras mascarillas. Ahora, eso es lo que yo te quiero comentar.
Let me ask you just very quickly, Vanuka, do those images are they drawn from your experience during the pandemic? I see, you know, of course, what you're wearing, your beautiful hats. There's a lot of bright colors that you use. But is there anything that you felt inspired in a way by the pandemic? You were inspired to do something, obviously, and motivated by the fact that you wanted to continue your practice as a bearer of this incredible tradition. I'm curious if these will be seen in 30 years from now. Will people look back and say, well, this was during the period of COVID-19. It was a time in which we expressed ourselves in a way through our own experiences, our living heritage, to help us cope with this huge challenge that not only infected our communities, but communities around the world.
Bueno, George, mi nombre es Violeta Quispe.
Yes.
Y bueno, comentarles que nuestro arte tiene esa esencia. Bueno, comentarles que nuestro arte tiene esa esencia. Nosotros siempre replicamos nuestras vivencias y nuestras experiencias en base de nuestro arte pictórico. Como por ejemplo, en la época del conflicto armado, nuestros padres también aplicaron su arte contando sus experiencias traumáticas que vivieron en esa época. En nuestro caso, nosotras como hijas herederas hemos heredado esa cuestión de poder plasmar nuestras memorias en nuestras obras, que queda como un registro. Es la esencia de las tablas pintadas de sarwa, donde nosotros plasmamos el árbol genealógico de nuestra familia y creamos un registro de memoria y lo guardamos para la nueva generación que conozca sus raíces. De la misma manera, nosotros hemos querido plasmar y cambiar el formato de nuestra tabla tradicional en las telas. Pero ¿qué es lo que pasó? Hubo un afán de suerte que en ese entonces yo creé las mascarillas reutilizables, cambiándole el soporte de las tablas pintadas de sarwa en telas. Pero hubo un complemento muy especial, que yo me comuniqué con las personas con un idioma universal, que es el tema del internet, que puse ni una menos, que era la interpretación y la lucha que tenemos nosotras como mujeres en contra de la violencia de género, alzar nuestras voces, porque lamentablemente en el confinamiento, en nuestro país, bueno, en nuestro país y creo que en muchos lados del mundo, hubo un aumento alarmante de la violencia contra la mujer. Y fue ahí que nosotros creamos esta mascarilla para enviarle un apoyo a las mujeres, ¿no? Para que no se sintieran solas y pudieran expresarse. Sí, aparte de estas, las mascarillas que nosotros hemos creado, nosotros tenemos esa fuerte conexión con nuestra madre tierra, que es la fuerte conexión que tenemos la flora de la comunidad, al igual que nosotros plasmamos en nuestros cuadros, en nuestras tablas, los cuentos míticos, que es muy arraigado a la comunidad, las sirenas, por ejemplo, ¿no? En un arte surrealista, como algo contemporáneo, algo nuevo. Y, por ejemplo, las frases de motivación a las mujeres, como el empoderamiento y la representación de la mujer andina. Ese es un poco de la historia.
Yeah, I think, yeah, I think you beautifully responded to my question, and there is so much, I think that we will look back and we will recognize as part of the creativity that you had through your COVID experiences. I do want to ask you one question before I move on. We have a chance to go back to Mali. And but I have one more question for you. In your communities, were there particular challenges with the COVID-19 pandemic that you had to deal with? I think you were very correct in saying earlier about the danger that women were in during the pandemic, and I was very moved when I saw that mask that you showed, because you were right. It happened in other places, but in particular for your community, was there anything that you felt was unique in terms of the challenges that you felt a challenge that you faced?
Bueno, comentarte que en Sarwa, como en los pueblos indígenas rurales en nuestro país, la violencia de género es muy normalizada. Lamentablemente, hasta el día de hoy, seguimos arrastrando el machismo, y en esta pandemia, yo considero que no ha cambiado mucho porque lamentablemente en las comunidades rurales es normalizada la violencia. Y por eso nosotras estamos aquí, luchando y visibilizando a la mujer a través del arte, de educarlas a ellas quizás con nuestra imagen, de no permitir la agresión contra ellas y de que un grito o un golpe no es algo normal. Se tiene que luchar por una equidad de género, valiéndonos del respeto mutuo. Eso es un poco de lo que nosotros queremos transmitir también con nuestra presencia.
Thank you very much. And when time allows, and I hope that we will, we'll have an opportunity to save a few minutes at towards the end to also see if we have questions coming in from people who are watching this. And I'm sure that we'll have some questions for you. And I'm trying to see that we can do that, giving us a chance to bring in the larger community. One thing that I will point out, masks, it seems around the world have become a way of expression. I also look at Hamza with his mask, which bears the traditional kafia print work, and you can see other your masks, of course, and other masks that you run into on the street. People with smiles, people with lips, people trying to express themselves through their masks. So. I have to do like Ernesto Otone, however. I have to get in touch with you so that I can get some beautiful masks like this and wear them proudly and tell the story of your story as well. At this point, we're going to head back to Mali, and we are going to talk to Boubacar, and that was Kurumase. Boubacar, who is a mason and a practitioner of earthen architecture. And so I think we have resolved the sound issues. And so, Boubacar, one of the, well, as I was saying earlier when I was introducing you, one of the beauties of your story, it's a story that we see, I think, with our friends from Peru, a story that we see in Palestine. Traditions are handed down, skills are handed down from generation to generation and over time. And so in your situation, you were, of course, the work that you do is outdoors. It's generally done in a larger group. How did you and the other Masons cope with this situation? Was there solidarity between the Masons who practice this earthen architecture, and how did you have to adapt to the physical distancing that was imposed pretty much universally during the lockdowns? But we'll start first with the solidarity between the Masons. Boubacar, I hope all is well with you in Mali.
Oui, oui. Bonjour tout le monde. D'abord, je commence par faire une pensée. Est-ce que vous nous entendez? Allô? Oui,
It does seem like we may still be having a bit of an issue with our audio from
Allô, allô?
That's
Allô?
much better.
Allô? Oui, maintenant, je commence à commencer à aller. Vous m'entendez? Ok. Bonjour tout le monde. Je m'appelle Kurvaso Maître Masson. J'ai pensé pour toutes les personnes qui sont...
There's a reason why. Tu peux demander à Caroline.
I think we're going to allow my colleagues to take some time to resolve this issue, and we're going to move on to Sri Lanka. As much as I would like to and want to, I have to say, hear from Boubacar, because this is such a wonderful tradition. I think it's important for us to see if we can get a better solution on this unfortunate sound issue. And so I am going to shift us then from Mali, and we're going to go to the again to the other side of the planet at supersonic speed, courtesy of our virtual platforms.
Une dernière fois pour qu'on essaye. Moi, je vais essayer de parler si peut-être que vous entendez.
I'm going to ask our colleagues in on my team if they might be able to mute that conversation for now. And we'll hopefully come back to, I want to come back to them after Sri Lanka. So at this point in Sri Lanka, we have waiting for us Premin Gamwari and Nalin Gamwari. Both gentlemen are practitioners of the traditional string puppet drama and have adapted to COVID-19's impact, and have also been, I think, a source of sharing information through this traditional art, which has a long, long history in Sri Lanka. So if I may introduce Premin Gamwari and Nalin Gamwari, as I mentioned, and their facilitator, Belinda Dewaje Nandadeva, who will help with translation for us as they will be speaking local language. So Belinda, can I start off with Premin Gamwari? It seems that I'm very curious, one, about how he began to realize, or when did he begin to realize that the traditional puppeteering could play a very important role in how his community could address the COVID-19 pandemic. Can our colleagues in Sri Lanka hear us? Okay, I'm not sure that we're having a success with sound from an audio from Sri Lanka. With that in mind, I'm going to head back to Cremona, Italy, where I'd like to. I have a question that I wanted to pose to the mayor in particular, which. Mayor, one of the things that well, we heard mentioned even by our colleagues and friends in Palestine. You know, governments take a role; they impose certain restrictions and regulations. But there's another question that needs to be addressed, which is: does government have a role when it comes to protecting and, in fact, perhaps even supporting these traditions because of their importance to the community and the cohesion that they can create for the community? Do you see that, as a man who has both a background in physics, a love for violin, and I'm sure an astute politician, with all of those three characteristics, Where is government in terms of living heritage? Does it have a role?
Surely, the government, obviously, the government during the lockdown has a responsibility, had the responsibility of the government of the sanitary policy, surely. But the role of the government is so important in the safeguarding of the heritage, material heritage. I could say that it's so important to establish a multi-level government in which the community establishes some rules we call district of violin makers. And in this district of the community, all the institutions talk one with the other in order to perform an ecosystem. With the, only one aim, and the aim is the aim to improve the knowledge, to transmit the knowledge, to make the contact between the knowledge and the innovation. And these institutions are the municipality, are the universities, are the laboratory of research, are the also the workshop of the violin makers. And the same time, it's so important to have another level. The other level is the MIBACT, that is the government, the central government. And with the central government, we are making a so important point that is the capacity building, because as all the histories about which we're speaking now say one so important point, that is in one community there are skills, there are capacities, and it's so important to improve the capacity and the awareness about the history, about the values, about the tradition. And with the government, we are working a lot, also before the COVID, but also during the COVID, and also for the future, and in particular with the UNESCO unit. And for example, the presence of the competence like anthropologists in this UNESCO unit are so important in order to understand the characteristic and the identity of the community. But there is another level of this government. For example, there is a UNESCO facilitators. The UNESCO facilitators are people who, with the government, with the MIBACT, with the unit of UNESCO in the MIBACT, are helping us in order to afford this so dramatic period. But the work with these people started before the COVID, and will continue in the future. And obviously also the UNESCO. So I want to stress this fact that the multi governance system connect different level of the interior community, of the human community, the local community, the government, central government community, and the international community. For us, it's so important, this point, because our heritage, material heritage, has an intrinsic relationship with all over the world. Cremona speaks necessarily. The violin makers are in connection necessarily with all over the world. Not only for the market, but because our tradition, our values are really international and universal value. The music and the Lanka shift heritage are represent, in fact, an heritage for all the humanity. So the government, multi-level government, correspond to this characteristic of our ICH.
Thank you, and I appreciate the fact that that we also at UNESCO were instrumental too in assisting and working with you on these issues.
If it is possible, only one word.
Please.
You represent for us really an hope, really an hope. Also, if I look at this screenshot, I look at all over the world, and in this moment, also to share the pain. To share the pain is so important in order to share the future. But to share the future is so important to individuate the identity, open identity of all the communities, and the safeguarding actions are so important. I want to say that for us, but you are so important for us in this sense. For us, the district of violin represents a place in which the knowledge is the most important thing. The value, the ethic approach to the reality is the most important thing. And a place in which the knowledge generates knowledge. The knowledge generates knowledge. And so the plan of the safeguarding, the capacity building are essential instruments in this sense.
Thank you very much. And again, much appreciated. I believe we have Mali ready for another attempt to be able to communicate with us. I do have to caution though, Mali, and if we have a chance to also get to Sri Lanka, we must be finished with this conversation in 12 minutes. This is a hard deadline. So I have to say now, my friend in Mali, Boubacar Kouramase, I want to hear your story. We want to hear your story, Boubacar. Oh, this makes me sad, I have to say. We're trying our best here. Boubacar, go ahead. Can we get Boubacar on the line?
Hello.
Yes, go ahead. So Boubacar, tell me, how is it that you and your fellow Masons...
Bonjour tout le monde.
Bonjour, bonjour.
Je dis, j'ai vécu cette période difficilement. Mais grâce à notre culture et notre solidarité, c'est ça qui nous a sauvés qu'on a pu surmonter. Le premier jour qu'on a entendu ce problème, ça a été un panique chez nous. Parce qu'on a eu peur. Dans le grand pays, ce qu'on a entendu, ils ont des moyens et ils n'ont pas trouvé de problème à plus forte raison chez nous. Donc, comme on a dans notre coutume ici, à chaque fois qu'il y a des problèmes comme ça, il y a des éléments, l'imam, le chef de village, là s'appelle dans la mosquée, fait la prière et la bénédiction. Donc ça a été fait par tous les fidèles de la mosquée. Et ça a été aussi comme une sorte de sensibilisation parce que tout le monde a compris qu'il y a ces problèmes. Tout le monde a informé sa famille. Il faut se protéger. Comme tout le monde porte masque, ça trouve que nous, on a notre turban ici, comme d'habitude qu'on utilise. D'autres, ils ont acheté des masques et ceux qui n'ont pas de moyens, qui ont des turbans, ils ont utilisé des masques. Je dis, c'est notre solidarité qui nous a pu aider dans cette période parce que tous les sentiers étaient arrêtés. Les maisons, la mosquée, tout était touché. Parce que notre maison, c'est une maison en terre, comme tout le monde sait. Elle a besoin d'entretien tout le temps, chaque année au moins une fois. Bon, notre pays était en crise. Après ça aussi, ça est venu ajouter encore. Bon, vraiment, notre ville est touchée. Notre ville est touchée fortement. Mais comme je dis, grâce à notre traduction et solidarité, on a pu se monter. Parce que chez nous, notre métier, c'est un métier qui est hérité dans la famille, de père en fils. Et chaque famille aussi a son client. Donc, cette solidarité qui est entre nous, même le propriétaire, si le propriétaire n'a pas de moyens, le maçon est obligé de dépendre. Parce que la maison est là comme pour lui. Donc, il faut garder la maison. Quand tu vois quelque chose comme problème, il faut résoudre aussi. Le propriétaire a des moyens. Donc, s'il n'a pas de moyens, il faut l'aider aussi. On continue comme ça. Même si quelqu'un est décédé de la famille, c'est le maçon qui l'accompagne à son dernier demeure. Donc, c'était un lien très, très important entre le maçon et le propriétaire de la maison. Bon, vous avez demandé comment notre coopération, on a fait quelque chose pour surmonter ça. Bon, comme toujours, c'est la solidarité. La solidarité que j'ai dit, c'est ça qui est passé entre nous. Bon, on se aide entre nous et on se sensibilise pour éviter. Mais Dieu merci, notre ville a été épargnée de ça. Et il y avait un moment qu'on a dû faire, il y a eu quelques décès, mais je ne sais pas le nombre exactement, c'est la santé qui peut répondre à ça. Mais ce n'était pas si beaucoup à tirer de la vie de Dieu nous a épargné de ça.
Merci beaucoup.
On a travaillé ici, à Djibouti. Surtout moi, j'ai travaillé ici. J'ai travaillé dans d'autres pays en Afrique, je travaille en Europe, je travaille aux États-Unis. Tout ça, j'ai amené notre culture pour montrer aux autres. Parce que quand je suis invité, je parle avec montrer la vie de Djibouti.
Merci Boubacar. Pardon, Boubacar, nous n'avons pas l'interprétation et à cause des problèmes techniques maintenant, on a perdu le temps et on a quelques minutes maintenant. Et je voudrais à ce moment donner une opportunité à nos amis à Sri Lanka. And so to our friends in Sri Lanka, I have to tell you, we only have a few minutes because of these technical difficulties. I hope that we have resolved those difficulties with you. Premen Gamwari, to what extent would you say your beautiful craft of traditional puppeteering in Sri Lanka had a role in helping people deal with the impact of COVID-19, of this pandemic?
Yes, George, thank you very much for giving the opportunity. Since we are running out of time, I think instead of giving you a verbal answer, let me invite our puppeteer, traditional puppeteer, Mr. Dani Gamwari, to show you, demonstrate how he did what he did with his puppet. Please be prepared for a short demonstration. Okay, go ahead.
Mama yoksipwa hatunu karantavana janatawa ka seve karan me wasanda tingalagan oh mame denodan sautte purudu kilmatto obalata kuloni me wasanda tingalenta mama kira denna mama kira denna api kalamuno meter duri nittona lag hijjo me wasangate bowi me bani fidono e bawnatno e bawnatno e wagema api mukaawde bandima bohum wadagateno mukade mukaawde bandime api jiwti abda raksa garda buloni e wagema අපි ටැක්ස් සේවීම අනිවාර්යයෙන්ම කළ යුතුයි. නිතර කළා කිනම් ඒ වඩාත් හොඳයි. අපේ දේශීය ක්‍රමයන් කලේ දේවල් කොහොමද තියෙන්නේ? කොල්ලකඳ පාන්නේ, එතකොට කොත්තමල්ලි පාන්නේ, එතනින් ගියාම වෙඩිවලකට වටනාවකට ඒවා පානකොට අපිට පුළුවන් මේ කොරෝනා වසංගතයෙන් ගැලවෙන්න. ඒ පිළිපැදීම ඔබේ අපේ යුතුයකම වගකීම අපේ ඊට.
Yes, George, what you saw is...
You get an applause from all of us. That is amazing. I have to tell you, if I was COVID-19, I wouldn't get near you guys. That puppet has a lot of... That puppet packs a lot of strength.
That's the devil's character normally used in our traditional dances as a spirit that brings all the evil to people. But what Mr. Nalin Gamwari did was very creative. He used the same puppet of the devil as a corona devil. That brings the good news to the public. The good news is to tell the public, instruct the public about the benefits of following the government's medical instructions to prevent from corona. So his instructions is a mix of Western medical practitioners' instructions like social distancing, wearing the mask and all that. And in addition to the devil, the corona devil also instructs them to the public to follow the indigenous medical practices like taking herbal teas and things like that. So it's a kind of reconciliation between the Western medical practices and indigenous medical practices to prevent yourself and your loved ones from corona. So that's why he did, and he prepared 4 such video clips, and part of that was broadcasted on the government television, but not everything.
Belinda, I have to tell you, thank you very, very much. I am so sorry that we won't hear from Premin Gamwari, but we do thank Premin and Nalin Gamwari for their contribution, and also for bringing actually something truly representative of our living heritage to this program. Thank you very much. At this point, I am going to have to bring things to a close, as we need to hand over to our General Assembly which is taking place today, and our program is within the context of the 8th session of the General Assembly for the states parties of the 2003 Convention for the Safeguarding of Intangible Cultural Heritage. I want to thank all of our participants. Truly a remarkable day for us to have your experiences shared with us. Gianluca, Mayor of Cremona, Virginia, the head of the museum, thank you. Boubacar, thank you for talking to us in French, and I hope that those who understood French could share in that experience. Hamza, Fuad, so much thanks to you as well, and what you've been doing in Palestine. To the wonderful woman of Peru, truly beautiful to see the Mass and to see you as well. Have I forgotten anybody? I hope not. I think I've got everybody covered here. Thank you all. Thank you to the team at Intangible Cultural Heritage, and to all of you. Ernesto Ottone, thank you also for your wonderful opening remarks. And at this point, I will tell you, I bid you adieu, and I hand over the keys to the 8th session of the General Assembly. Thank you all very, very much.
Right. බැලලා අරින්න.
අපේ මම හිතුවේ අපි දැනෙන්නද ආවා.
ඔව් ඒක තමයි.
අන්තිම ශිල්පීන්ගේ අදහසක්
ඔව් ඒක තමයි ඒගොල්ලන්ගේ මේක ශිල්පීන්ගේ අදහස් ගන්න එක. ඔය ඊට පස්සේ මම දැන් අපි එක්කෙනෙක් කතා කරුවා නම් එතනින්ම ඉවර වෙනවා. ඒක නිසා මම හිතුවා
The recording has stopped.
demonstration එකවත් කරමු කියලා. අපරාධ